Welcome into what feels like the millionth episode of this week's Betting the Pitch. I'm your host, Real_G Warner, on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. And this is going to be a sort of live because since we got matches starting in about 38 minutes for the first, rounds of the Europa League and the Europa Conference League. There's going to be some skipping of some of these matches because there are huge spreads. A lot of teams I don't follow. So I'll put that out there. But also we'll be going through and trying to find some best bets, likely in the afternoon window. But I wanted to go through what we have in front of us since there is still ample time to get some bets in the next few minutes. If you're listening on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It'd be huge to get me up the search rankings. If you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. And if you're not a member of my Patreon, I recommend becoming a patron. Patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. You get direct access to me, all my leans, all my plays throughout the day. Download the app, turn on notifications. You get a buzz every time I put a play in, put a write-up in. So you have everything at your fingertips as quickly as possible because there is a stock market effect to this thing we call sports betting, as well as winning the actual bets themselves. Good numbers are really important. And I also suggest you shop for good numbers, and having more sports books at your fingertip is the best way to make that happen. So check out within the podcast description a link to join Bet Online. All lines quoted in this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag, my favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced juices offered on almost every game you want to bet right up until game time. Please follow the link found in the podcast description, which I just mentioned, to fund your account and use promo code GW50. You got to use promo code GW50 and you get 50% match bonus up to $1,000. I know it works for new accounts. Someone let me know if it works for accounts that are already established. If you're going to reload or something like that, it might still work. I'm not sure. Keep me posted on that. Okay, so I'm going to go through. We did a futures podcast last night for the Europa League and Europa Conference League, kind of as a precursor to today's episode. But I'm going to go through with the lines that are available right now that we can bet and win money on in the next few hours or the rest of today. And that's where we're going to start. We're going to start in the Europa League since that's a bigger competition. And I'll give you an idea of kind of where lines have moved. And try to give some thoughts, though there's not a huge amount here that I'm looking at from, or there's a few matches I am, but a lot are kind of skips. One of the first skips is Lask Linz hosting Liverpool. Currently Lask a 1.5 goal underdog at home. The over-under is 3.25, juiced heavily the over. That really has, where's movement gone? Started at 1.5, so it's still there. Unsurprisingly, Liverpool money has come in. It started as very juiced 3.25 to the under. That's kind of flipped completely to the over. But based on Liverpool's dominance, their ability to score, and what they've done in the Premier League, I think that makes sense. Move next to Union Saint-Gilloise hosting Toulouse from Ligue 1 in France. Union Saint-Gilloise from Belgium. The Belgian side, a 0.5 goal favorite at home, a little bit more juice. Over unders 2.5, juiced all the way to the over. In terms of moving this one, started as a half from when I was tracking it. Not a ton of stuff has happened. Some money coming in on the over to push that a little bit higher, which makes sense because Toulouse are a front-footed side going on the road, and Union Saint-Gilloise were really competitive in the Europa Conference League last season. Did sell their star striker Boniface to Bayer Leverkusen. So we'll see what happens to them. I'm very curious to see just how deep those waters there, because they were very good last year. And I think I like them today. I don't really have interest in Toulouse. They have a long way to go to prove that they're anywhere close to the French Cup winning side that they were last season. Move next to Rennes hosting Maccabi Haifa. Rennes currently a 1 goal favorite, a little more juice on Haifa. Over under is 2.75, juice to the over. I guess some money has come in to knock this one down to Haifa from 1.25 goals to now only a single goal underdog, still significant underdogs, 5-1 odds to win in regulation. So there's not a lot of high expectations there, but total's been kind of flying around. Rennes are a really offensive team, especially at home where they're a lot better than they have drastic road splits when they go away. But they should be pretty comfortable here. An Israeli side flying in from Israel on the Asian continent, somehow playing European competition. I said that last night, so I'll let that leave that off to the side. But Rennes have a lot to prove. They've sold a lot of players, but they did bring in a lot of talent and have gotten a lot more veteran of a team. So I kind of like them later in the season once they gel with all the new bodies for this competition and for league. I don't know that Haifa have enough for me to want to get involved just yet. Next move to Servette. which I believe are from Geneva, and they're hosting Slavia Prague. Currently Servette, a half a goal underdog at home with almost all the juice over-unders, 2.5, juice heavily the under. And so when I'm looking at Servette here, they've taken on a little bit of money, but not really that meaningful. Line hasn't moved too much. It's only gotten very juiced to the under. So not a lot of goals expected in this one. I don't have much more to add. Sheriff Tiraspol from Moldova hosting AS Roma, probably Associazione Sportive or something like that. Though they're Italians, so probably something different. But anyway, Sheriff a 1-goal underdog at home. All the juice on Roma on the road, and the over-under is 2.25 juiced to the over. Sheriff have not moved too much, +1 the whole way since I've been tracking it. The over-under has moved a little bit around, but really it's, I guess, taking some money on over, but that should, I guess, be expected with the way pretty much big teams get bet here, as do the overs right until kickoff, unless there's some big change in a lineup or something like that. Sheriff are famous from playing well in Champions League a few seasons ago, stealing some points, and I believe beating Real Madrid. But they are going to have a big battle here with Roma at home. They're probably not as overlooked as they have been in the past. Roma might be rotating a fair amount. I'm about to sneeze, so I don't know what to do now. Well, hopefully that wasn't too bad for everyone. I think I muted one of my mics. Anyway, or hopefully that is following through both programs. Hopefully that's the last one. Anyway, Roma, I guess I could look up their lineup right now. It should be available. Google's usually my one-stop shop for this, but sometimes it takes a while to update. Yeah, it looks like Lukaku stars, Zalewski, Il Faraone. So that's definitely some changes without Dybala in there. Cristante, Renato Sanchez, Karsdorp, Awar. I mean, so many great names, talented players. Mancini, Indica, and Llorente, all looks like a pretty similar back line to what played against Empoli this weekend in a 7-0 victory. And then looks like they've rotated their goalkeeper. Rui Patricio is on the bench. Some guy named Filar is in. Don't really know any of the players from Sheriff, and looks like Roma is taking this somewhat seriously with certainly some rotation, but definitely some good players in that lineup. Moving next to Hacken, they're on the road at Bayer Leverkusen. Leverkusen, a 2.75 goal favorite, which has jumped quite a bit, probably based on how well they've been playing in the Bundesliga to start the season. But I had it as low as 2.25, all the way got up to a +3 underdog on Hacken, but now at 2.75, potentially climbing back to that +3 number. Total has jumped from 3.75 all the way to 4.25, but now we're back down to 4 at even money. So a lot of juice to the over. Not really interested in fading Leverkusen because they look like a really strong side to start the season. Karabag then hosts Molde, who we learned last night. Molde are from Norway, not Sweden, but Karabag, Azerbaijani side. They're a quarter goal favorite at home right now. Molde was a pick'em, climbed to a quarter goal underdog with a lot of juice, and it seems like some money is steadily flowing in on Karabag at this point. The total is 2.5, and it's definitely been taking some over money as well. Don't really have a huge insight into either of these sides, I must admit. Next, I'll move to Panathinaikos, who knocked out Marseille in the Champions League qualifying, but did not end up making it to that tournament. They are hosting Villarreal. There's been some movement, fair amount of movement actually, on Panathinaikos, easy for me to pronounce. And they are now a pick'em with a little bit more juice, from climbing from a quarter goal underdog with more juice on Villarreal on the road all the way to pick'em now. And that's probably taking it out of my kind of wheelhouse or ability to play. Villarreal already sacked their manager. They've been off to a really poor start. Really haven't had a great manager situation ever since Unai Emery left, bolted for Aston Villa. From my current point of view on Villarreal, is I want to be against them as much as possible. I don't think they play good defense. I don't think they're really as strong as their name suggests, because they've been pretty good the last couple seasons. But Panathinaikos certainly is not one of the biggest names in the Greek leagues, though they're in the Europa leagues. That does say something. Olympiacos are about to come up next, and they're in this tournament as well. I'm kind of hoping that they would climb to an underdog, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen, especially the way pretty much everything has been moving against Villarreal so far. I can't imagine there's a lot of people that are going to buy back on a Villarreal side who've been, I guess, changing managers. When I look at the Villarreal lineup, we got Ben Brereton, the Chilean somehow, or Chilean, because he doesn't even know how to pronounce his mother's, I guess, homeland. Then Looks like we have El Comandante next to him, Jose Luis Morales, who's great, but hasn't been really that effective ever since he moved to Villarreal when Levante got relegated. Midfield seems okay. Manu Trigueros is pretty old. Comasanya, Capoue, and Denis Suarez, who's come in from Celta de Vigo last season, as amongst other places. Looking at the back line, it looks Gabia started this weekend, and then looks like a fairly rotated back line with Pepe Reina at goalkeeper. So certainly some rotation there. Not really a great side in my humble opinion, but when I look at Panathinaikos, I don't really know a ton of the namers in this team. So don't know that there's much for me to do, especially not at Pick'em. I'm going to go, I guess, now, since we got 30 minutes to play, I'll move now to the Europa League and then come back and do the afternoon windows, which is where we'll get a best bet. I think that's the best way probably to do it so that people have some time to bet it, because I can't imagine you're listening to this if you're going to work today. So we have Zrinjski Mostar. They're hosting AZ Alkmaar. They're a +1 underdog with all the juice. Over unders 2.5. Juice the under. Don't have a lot more to add there, though. I know, and I pointed out last night, if you listen to that podcast, that a lot of people were betting AZ Alkmaar, or at least someone was betting them to potentially win the Europa Conference League, which is certainly stepping out. Legia Warsaw then hosts Aston Villa. Currently, Legia Warsaw, a 1-goal underdog right now at home. Over unders 2 3/4. Just more to the over. Not a lot of movement there. Ultimately, some money coming in Aston Villa, as you would expect. Premier League side going on the road, only have to win by a goal. Oh yeah, they're in Poland. That should be easy. I would not believe that. These are competitions in Europe where you look against the big clubs, in my humble opinion. Most of these teams that made it to these competitions are good, maybe not on the same level, don't have the same budgets, but they are talented, more talented than you'd expect. Ferencváros from Budapest then are a 1 3/4 goal favorite to Kukariki. That looks like that hasn't moved a lot either. Don't have a lot of insight into that one. Genk then host Fiorentina. Genk, a 1/4 goal underdog at home with most of the juice over. There's 2 3/4 juice the over. Fiorentina are kind of tough to predict, in my humble opinion. It looks like some of their money has come in on back. I guess it was almost on Genk for a little while. Then some Fiorentina money has come back, and then it's gone back and forth. Not sure how useful that is, so I'll just probably keep moving. Eintracht Frankfurt now hosts Aberdeen. Currently Eintracht a 2-goal favorite, which is actually has come down a little bit. Some money coming in from Aberdeen, probably based on the inability for Eintracht Frankfurt to score goals and their new manager. It's been a problem for a little while, and then they lost Kolo Muani. So they're like number one by far and away, biggest striker, scariest player on the side. And they're going to have to figure out how to do that, especially as a really big favorite in this competition. They've been very good. I don't think they've lost yet this season, but ultimately that's not good enough when you're a 2-goal favorite. So certainly I couldn't blame anyone for wanting to play Aberdeen +2. Maybe you want to look at under 3 1/4, as that might be give you a little bit more space, lose by 3 goals if Aberdeen aren't going to score, and ultimately still cover or win your bet. Helsinki then hosts PAOK. Currently Helsinki a 1/2 goal underdog at home. Looks like that hasn't moved too much either. Over under 2 1/4, very juiced to the over right now. Next I'll move to Fenerbahce hosting Nordsjælland. We've seen some movement there, and I kind of highlighted last night. I'm interested in Nordsjælland just because of the Martin Ingvartsen signing from the Bundesliga last year. I know he can score goals, and I'm interested in seeing what that'll look like. Very potentially tough first matchup going to Turkey, where there are very, very big time crowds there. They've signed Livakovic, the Croatian goalkeeper who we all saw in the World Cup. Alexander Žiku as well from Strasbourg. And then looks like Fred's there now. Batshuayi is starting. So like there's a lot of decent names that we would know in the Turkish league at this point. Ingvartsen starting at striker for Nordsjælland, but the rest of that side, I don't know any of these names, I don't think. A couple Hansons in the starting lineup, but I guess that's probably to be expected. Edin Dzeko also at Fenerbahce. So like Tadic there too. So like there's a lot of big names on Fenerbahce, as well as Rodrigo Bacau, Szymanski there too. I mean, there's huge names all over. So one of those I'd be interesting to watch that result. It says something to me that +1 has fallen to 3/4 of a goal. That tells me there's some market out there that does like Nordsjælland, and it's also gotten very juiced at 3/4 of a goal. So that tells me if you're a believer in the efficient market hypothesis that there's going to be a very tight game in Turkey. But since I lost that one, I really don't want to now pay a very juiced 3/4. Probably will fall to a half before we kick off, actually. And then last but not least, in this early window of the Europa Conference League, we've got Ludogorets hosting Spartak Trnava. Ludogorets a 1.25 goal favorite. With all the juice on Spartak on the road, over under is 2 3/4 juice to the over. And that hasn't moved since last night. So I'm probably not going to spend more time on that, but I'll move back to the Europa League and then we'll find some best bets. Hopefully that was valuable to anyone that is following live. I don't expect to do this game day, but I had to do futures episodes. And there's only so much time in this world to record everything in the world. So now we'll go to the afternoon, or the later window in the Europa League. Start with Olympiacos hosting a sport called Freiburg, or the closest team I follow in all of Europe. Olympiacos currently a pick'em with more juice at home, or all of the juice at home. Over under is 2.5, juice very heavily the under, and that's probably the way I've been thinking about this one for a while. The Freiburg defense have certainly not lived up to expectations so far to start the season. But they were ultimately in a winning position against Borussia Dortmund last weekend. Kind of surprisingly went for the kill to try to go up 3-1 instead of, they fell behind 1-0, took a 2-1 lead, and then really were going for their third goal. Got kind of pipped on a counterattack 2-2, and then had a tough, poor step that happened to be on a calf of an opposing player, got a red card, and then fell behind, had an injury, gave up a goal with 9 men on the pitch on a set piece, which was brutal, and then a late goal as they were kind of pushing forward to try to go for an equalizer. Not great. Hard to really give much credence to that performance, though they were in the lead for a while, despite falling behind. And I think that Freiburg are going to have to continue to work on this defense. They've been playing younger players late in the matches, which hasn't gone well, especially after that red card. They had some new players on the pitch, and one was off of it, I believe, due to injury. Certainly a long way to go and a lot to prove, because things change each season. But Christian Streik's team has been really great defensively for a while. Olympiacos were not really at the races last season in this competition. They were, I think, in Freiburg's group as well and really struggled. So I, as a slight favorite right now, I'm actually also waiting to see if Freiburg move to an underdog, because I think they can go on the road and make this really hard on Olympiacos. Probably very motivated after letting that game slip through their hands this weekend. But I also like under 2.5 as well. West Ham then hosts Baka Topola. Currently, West Ham a 2.5 goal favorite. Over under is 3.5. Most of the juice is on Baka Topola on the road, and also slightly to the under. I would lean under here as well. I just don't know really where Baka Topola are even from, nor if that unknown alien type of team, if they're going to have the ability to defend West Ham, who are off to a great start, scoring a ton of goals in the Premier League. That is going to dry up. I'm almost certain of it. But maybe it doesn't do that here today. We'll move next to Rangers hosting Real Betis, and probably one of the biggest matchups of the Europa League's first match day. Rangers currently a pick'em with all the juice right now. Over unders 2.5, juice the under. Rangers have been taking a little bit of money, which I guess makes sense on a home team, also a big name in the UK. The Real Betis, they essentially played backups against Barcelona this past weekend, got throttled. But that tells me that they're going to have a very, very well-rested side for this Rangers matchup. And so I'm looking to see if they climb to a quarter goal underdog. We don't have it yet, but certainly trending in that direction. Juice hasn't moved too much, but it's moved about 8 cents already at BetOnline. So we might get that. 2.5 is the over-under. Betis are still a scary team for me, with taking too many yellows and the turn into red cards, or just straight reds in general. So that's a concern, but I think I'm still interested in Real Betis if they move to that quarter of a goal, depending on lineups, of course. Sparta Prague then hosts Aris. Currently, Sparta Prague a 1-goal favorite at home. And this, let's see, their over-under is 2 3/4. Choose heavily to the over. Don't really have a huge interest, or I don't really know much about Aris, I'll put it that way. Atalanta then hosts Rako Czeskowa. Currently, Atalanta 1.5 goal favorite at home, with the over-under at 2 3/4. Juice to the over and slightly to the road team. That's so hard for me to pronounce. It looks like some money has come in on the road team here. Rakov, they've ultimately dropped from 1 3/4 goal underdogs to now a little bit more juiced on 1.5. Doesn't say too much, but it does at least show some respect for a road team when you expect the big favorite to be getting bet a fair amount. Also, the total has come down. So maybe that's suggesting that Atalanta are not playing their strongest side here, potentially more focused on Serie A. I don't blame them for that, but they haven't been in Europe for a year. So they probably want to get off to a good start, as everyone would. But seeing the dog and the under both take money does kind of push, and it correlates in the same sort of direction as well. Moving next to Marseille visiting Ajax. Currently, Ajax a pick'em, but with almost all the juice right now at home, over unders 2 3/4, juice the over. Looks like that hasn't moved a ton. I mean, I guess Marseille were growing and then got some money bought back on them with getting odds at pick'em. And then as for the total, it's been, I guess, getting bet to the under a little bit, but it's still with the juice really favoring the over direction. Ajax had a really bad year in Europe last season. This is certainly a good chance for them to do better at a worse Europa League competition compared to Champions League. But I would kind of expect them to not be as good until proven otherwise. So I'm interested if Marseille move to an underdog, potentially go on the road, get a draw, and get paid at least half of that. Next, we'll go to Sturm Graz from Austria, hosting Sporting Lisboa. Sturm Graz, a half a goal underdog at home. Over under is 2.5, juice heavily to the over, and that's been getting bet a fair amount. Sporting Lisboa, to me, are a defensive side, or have been, at least in the Champions League, or when they play really good sides. Probably not the same situation, even though they're on the road in Austria here. Sporting, I think, has a little bit of pedigree in this competition, kind of expectations that they're going to perform well. As a road favorite, that's not interesting to me, and I'm not interested in the home dog either. Last but not least, before we give a best bet that will then go into the ultimate best bet portion of the show, we have Brighton and AEK Athens, who are actually a much bigger name side and have a lot bigger names in it than you'd expect. I guess the Greek lottery runs through the owner of AEK Athens, which I'm sure is only above board. But anyway, Brighton, a 2-goal favorite with all the juice right now. Over under is 3.5, juice heavily the under. Numbers have, I mean, a lot of money has come in actually on Brighton, both to win this competition, to win their group, plus to, I guess, on this spread as well, as AEK Athens were very juiced +2 initially, and now are getting money and probably will climb to 2.25 before this kicks off. Totals climb from 3 to 3.5. That doesn't surprise me because Brighton will attack all out at all times. I'm most interested to see what Brighton's lineup is going to look like, because they've been rotating quite a bit, even in the Premier League, and it seems like they've got a lot of depth, and they'll be using that in both these competitions this season. Going to be a tough spot for AEK Athens. I almost kind of feel like I want to see them get embarrassed in that opener, which will then set up for some decent value when they play against Ajax and Marseille in their next matches, but we'll ultimately end up seeing what happens there. And really, who the heck knows? So for ultimate best bet on this episode, I'm going to go with, since I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have the pick'ems are still around right now. So waiting on Freiburg, on Marseille, and also on Real Betis, and lost the quarter of a goal on Panathinaikos by far, because we're now at a juiced pick'em right now. So I think I'm going to go with the under in the Freiburg and Olympiacos match. So that currently is 2.5. It's pretty juiced to the under at the moment, but I'll take under 2.5 as my best bet in the Europa League. And now I'll move to the Conference League for the second half, the later matches. I'll start with Slovan Bratislava against Key. And now that we're there, currently Slovan Bratislava 1-goal favorite, almost all the juice on Key Klaksvik. Over under 2 3/4. Not going to really go into more there. Zoya Luhansk, not much there for me to talk about either. Breoblik and Maccabi Tel Aviv, 2.5 goal underdog. That's gigantic and has been climbing. So unfortunately, it seems like Maccabi Tel Aviv, if you're trusting the numbers at all, which I do, there's a lot of expectations that Breoblik are going to get smacked around today. Victoria Plzen, now a 1.5 goal favorite with more of the juice. Balkani is on the road visiting them, under 3. Looks like that's juiced a little bit. Next, I'll move to Dinamo Zagreb and Astana. Dinamo Zagreb, 1.5 goal favorite. They've taken some money to win their group. Which I think is saying something. It's flipped from being second most likely to win the group, or expected to come second, to being favorites. So that's saying something to me. Over under of 3 on that match doesn't really say a ton to me. I think the biggest matchup of the second window in the Europa Conference League is Bruges hosting Besiktas from Turkey. And currently we got Bruges, half a goal favorite. That hasn't moved a ton, though. It seems like there's been more money coming in on Besiktas on the road. Over under is 2.75, and that's a little bit more juice to the over. I think my biggest interest in this one is on the Besiktas side, just because Club Brugge, they got still a lot of name value from how well they performed in Champions League last year, but ultimately didn't make that competition, are here stuck in Europa League. They had to really do a big job, or Europa Conference League, excuse me. They had to win a playoff also to be in here against Osasuna from Spain, which says something, but ultimately I think speaks to kind of how far the club has fallen and really how much they put into their season last year in the Champions League. It's tough to bounce back to get to that level. And last but not least, Lugano, they've been, I guess, getting faded overnight. Bodo Glimt taking a fair amount of money on the road. Half goal favorite, was Lugano's climbed from a quarter of a goal. And it looks like also the over's been getting bet a lot too there. So I think for my ultimate best bet, the Europa Conference League portion, I'm going to go with Besiktas getting a half of a goal, and that'll end up coming into what I'm about to record in 1 second, and then somehow make it into a reel all within the next few minutes so everyone can bet it. So I guess let's, I think just make sure I'm doing this correctly so I'm not missing. Yeah, let's do it. Okay. Hey, this is real_G Warner. This is betting the pitch number 224. And this is the Europa Conference League match day 1 best bet portion for ultimate best bet. So from the Europa League, I'm going to go with Sport Club Freiburg under 2.5 goals on the road at Olympiacos. And then in the Europa Conference League, I'm going to go Besiktas on the road at Club Brugge, getting a half of a goal. But for the ultimate best bet, and this is what's going to go down as the record keeping for next week's episode, or whenever the next round of this will be, I'm going to go with Sport Club Freiburg on the road at Olympiacos under 2.5 goals. They had a really tough result this weekend against Borussia Dortmund, really because of a tough late red card that really kept them from potentially winning the match, but certainly at least earning a point. I expect that they're pretty disappointed in defense so far this season. There'll be a big focus on that. And Olympiacos were really not at the races in this competition last season. I think Freiburg will continue to control them and will make this a really hard match for the home favorite, or very slight home favorite, to score. And that'll do it for this episode of Betting the Pitch. Hopefully this gave you something right before these matches kick off in the next 10 minutes. And of course, if you're listening a little bit later for the afternoon stuff, keep in mind, we'll be doing this a lot earlier when there's not a futures episode to do next time. So thank you for tuning in. If you're on YouTube, please hit subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave a 5-star review. And if you're not a patron yet, check out patreon.com. Just a real_G Warner. And I will respond to anything I see in my DMs on Instagram, Twitter, or Patreon. So thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.